بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you all and your families and keep you all in good health and good faith, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to preserve us in Islam and to give us success in this life and the next life. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, we wanted to continue in our reading of the branches of faith by Imam Al-Bayhaqi. Alhamdulillah, we're nearing the end of the summary by of Imam Al-Bayhaqi's book, and inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us success to finish it and to understand it and apply it in our lives, inshallah ta'ala. So Imam Al-Bayhaqi mentioned several branches of faith towards the end of the text, which he identified one by one, which are coming from a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that a Muslim has 5 rights over another Muslim, or that there are 5 things that the Muslim must give his fellow Muslim or Muslimah. Number 1 is that they return the salam. So if a Muslim greets you, Assalamu alaikum, it's upon you to at least return the greeting equally. And this is based on an ayah in the Quran. إِذَا حُيِّيتُم بِتَحِيَّةٍ فَحَيُّوا بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهَا أَوْ رُدُّوهَا, which is in Surah An-Nisa, that when you're greeted with a greeting, that you return it equally or better than it was given. So if someone says Assalamu alaikum with a nice big smile, you want to greet them and return their greeting, inshallah, with Allah's permission, equally or better than what they greeted you. So part of that is the wording, and part of that is the spirit. So if a Muslim greets you with a nice big smile, you don't greet them with a frown, right? You want to greet them, inshallah, with a similar sort of feeling as well. And the better than that is to respond with the same wording or better than that. So if they say Assalamu alaikum, you say Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, or Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. You would increase the wording to increase the benefit for you, inshallah ta'ala. That's number 1. And it's interesting, the salam, I mean we talked about that in the previous video, but the salam is one thing which the scholars mentioned that generally speaking, things which are obligations are better and more rewarded than things which are sunnah or which are nawafil, which are extra things. For example, praying dhuhr, 4 rakats of dhuhr, is more rewarded and pleasing to Allah and blessed than praying 4 rakat of sunnah. If someone were to ask you which 4 are better, the 4 obligatory prayers are better than the 4 sunnah prayers. One of the exceptions to this general rule, so as another example, the fasting of Ramadan is more pleasing and blessed to Allah. You're going to get more reward fasting in Ramadan than fasting on Mondays and Thursdays, or fasting on any other day. The fast of Ramadan is, because it's an obligation, you're actually rewarded more for it. This is a general principle which the scholars have mentioned. One of the exceptions to that principle is the salam. So when you walk down the street, you don't have to greet every single person you meet. If you're walking in a public space, imagine you live in Cairo or Karachi or wherever, you're passing hundreds and hundreds of people every day, and vice versa. You can't. It's very difficult to go around greeting every single person. So it's not technically, on a technical level, it's not an obligation to greet every single person you pass walking down the street. But if you do it, it's the sunnah, it's mustahab, it's encouraged to do it. You're getting a reward for doing it. So if you greet someone, it's a blessed thing to do, but it's not an absolute obligation. But now once they've heard the salam, they're obligated to return the salam. So for them it's an obligation, but for you, because you started it, it's considered sunnah or mustahab. It's encouraged to do so. This is one of the few examples where an encouraged act in this situation is now actually more rewarded than the obligatory act. That the encouraged act is actually more rewarded because you started the greeting. You initiated the transaction, so to speak. You initiated the interaction between you and your brother, or you and your sister, and that is a blessed interaction. As we mentioned before, in the last video, greeting your brother or your sister in Islam, this is a blessed act, right? It builds brotherhood and sisterhood, and it connects us as a community, and builds love and between us. So this is a blessed act. So you started that interaction. So because you started that interaction, you actually get more reward than if you had not done so. So that's the first right of the Muslim, is that they return the salam. So if you're greeted by a Muslim, you should return the salam. And in our day and age, people sometimes ask, well, what if I don't know if that person is really a Muslim or not, if he's from this sect or this group, or in our day and age, if someone gives you salam, say wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, and especially if you don't know, if you don't know the person's a Muslim, you don't have the right to say they're not a Muslim, and you don't have the right to give them some sort of aqidah test before you return their salam, right? So that you should keep that in mind. The other thing that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that one of the rights upon that a Muslim has over another Muslim, is visiting them when they're sick. Now that doesn't mean every Muslim has to visit every other Muslim when they're sick, but this is, in a general sense, the community should not let one another, we should not let each other be in these states of sicknesses and difficulty without support. So visiting them, visiting someone who's sick, is a way of supporting them. It's a way of relieving their suffering. It's a way of providing some sort of comfort for them, and will help them deal with the pain. Sometimes when someone visits, you actually just have some moments of conversation, and you're able to even sometimes forget about the pain by talking about other things and just chit-chatting with the person, and it gives them ability to kind of pause from the moments of pain that they might be in. So alhamdulillah, these are all blessed things that we want to relieve the suffering of our brothers and sisters, and we want to show them that we're there to support them morally and that sort of thing. The other thing which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned is tashmeet al-atis, which is when somebody sneezes, that you say to them, yarhamakallah, that you say to them, may Allah have mercy upon you. This again is, this, alhamdulillah, all these things, when we look at them in the big picture, these are all ways of increasing brotherhood and sisterhood, and praying for one another, and showing, wishing well for one another. This is really the essence of what all these represent, alhamdulillah. The fourth thing is ittiba' al-janaiz, following the funerals. And if you cannot follow the funeral, that you pray over the person. So if you can pray the janazah and then go to the cemetery, that's better than just praying the janazah. But in either case, you're rewarded. The person who goes all the way to the cemetery and helps to bury or witnesses the burial gets 2 mountains of good deeds, and the one who prays over the person gets 1 mountain of good deeds, and each mountain is like the mountain of Uhud, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. The last thing in this hadith, which is in Bukhari and Muslim, is ijabatul da'wah, is answering a invitation, or accepting an invitation when one invite you somewhere. Now obviously this is not always 100% possible. There are times when you're invited to something and you just literally can't go due to other obligations, or some sort of something which forbids you, or something which restricts you from doing so. Work schedule or travel schedule, things which they don't allow for you to accept the invitation. Those are things which are these are excusable issues. But whenever you can, if someone invites you, you try to accept their invitation. The scholars have mentioned there are times where there are exceptions to the rule. So if someone were to invite you to a wedding, and you know that there's going to be really inappropriate things there, alcohol served, etc., etc., you don't have to accept that invitation. Those are acceptable excuses, but you're welcome to, you should still deal with them in a gentle manner, and politely excuse yourself, but those are exceptions to the rule, inshallah. Now there's another hadith that's reported in Sahih Muslim as well, which mentions a sixth branch. Which is that when he or she asks you for advice, that you give them sincere advice. When a Muslim asks you for advice and is seeking guidance and support from you, that you should give them that whenever possible. This is really important in our time because things are really difficult for a lot of people, and people don't really know what to do about it. There's a lot of new things going on every day. There are, for example, this pandemic, and there are things which people need advice and they need guidance. So this is really important that when a Muslim asks you for your advice, that you give them sincere advice. And this advice, nasiha in Islam, is not just telling them what you want them to do, but you tell them what's best for them, with no sort of ulterior motives or anything. Purely for the sake of Allah, that you guide them to what you deem to be best for them, and you ask Allah to guide them in whatever decision they make. And Allah, even if they were to not take your advice and maybe do other than what you suggested, that you would hope that Allah gives them success and comfort and happiness in this life and the next life, and that you don't take it personally. For example, if they didn't act upon your advice, you don't take it personally. This is part of that complete sincerity for them, that whatever happens, the important thing is that they're healthy and successful, and they are living lives which are pleasing to Allah, etc., etc. It's not about whether you were right or you were wrong. So you want to give that advice, no matter whether they take it or not, or whether they act upon it or not. And you hope that they, whatever decision they make, was the right decision, and that Allah is pleased with them and their decisions, and blesses them in them, inshallah. So these are the 5 or 6 things which are really due from one Muslim to another Muslim. Okay, and as I mentioned, that these are all things. Each one of these things, really, when we think about them, shows the amount of love and support and the well-being that we should want for every single Muslim. We should want them to be happy. We should want them to be successful. We should want them to be living lives which are pleasing to Allah. We want them to die in a state of faith. We want them to be people of Jannah. We want them to be people who will find Allah's mercy on the Day of Judgment. We don't want them to be people which Allah is angered with, people who wind up in the hellfire, right? So all of these things in reality are meant to increase our love for one another. They're meant for us to support our brothers and sisters when they need our support, and vice versa. And many of us have been in situations where we've been sick, and we find someone, maybe sometimes people we weren't even expecting to come to our rescue or come to support us. You find them, just Allah brought them to you, right? You didn't call them. Maybe you haven't even spoken to them for some time, and you find them at your bedside, and then you find them calling you and checking in on you. Alhamdulillah. So this is one of the beautiful things about these branches of hadith, which are based on these hadith, that they increase that love for one another and support for one another. Now, in reality, we have to realize that in this time, with the pandemic and the quarantine, that a lot of these are very difficult to actually implement. So if someone's sick right now with influenza or that bronchitis or anything, now it's very difficult to visit them, right? And it might actually be dangerous for you to visit them, or vice versa. If they have a weakened immune system, it's not ideal for you to go visit them. If you could potentially be carrying a virus which could hurt them if they contracted the virus due to their weak immune system, right? So there are a number of things which need to be taken into account so that we don't hurt one another, right? So despite the fact that it might look like it's contrary to this hadith, the hadith is saying that you should visit the sick, and we're saying no, don't visit the sick, right? It sounds like a contradiction, but in reality it is in line, absolute, in agreement, 100% agreement with the essence of this hadith. What is the essence of this hadith? That we support one another, we do not harm one another, we increase our love and affection for one another, and care about one another over, this is the nature of the essence of what this hadith is saying, what these branches are telling us to do, right? So in this situation, that might be the best way to achieve that might actually be not doing the literal instruction of visiting the sick, but it might actually be in staying away from the sick at that time. But there are alternatives, and there are means by which we can convey to the best of our ability our intentions and our desires, that if we were able to visit them, that we would visit them. And we've seen this on social media, people taking their children and going to their parents' homes and just sitting outside of the home and waving to their parents while their parents are inside the house, they are outside the house with their children, waving at their parents, right, at the grandparents. These are things, that this is not an ideal situation, but it's showing them our love for them and our affection for them and our caring for them, and that we remember them and that we want the best for them, and that we want them, even if all we can do is give them a smile, right, that they see. So alhamdulillah, there are alternatives. There's a lot of opportunity with technology for us to reach out to them and show them our support. Alhamdulillah, Muslim organizations and non-Muslim organizations have been reaching out to the elderly and those in need with food and supplies and that sort of thing. Alhamdulillah. And this is really, really important in these critical times, not just for the supplies themselves. That's part of it. Food and medicine and the things which they need, like rubber gloves and masks and that sort of thing. That's really important. But even more important is that human connection, right? That they know that someone is thinking about them. They know that someone has their back, so to speak, and is looking out for them to the best of their ability, right? This goes a long way. And a lot of us have probably in the last couple weeks received phone calls from friends and family, which we don't really hear from a lot. And we get calls from people just wanting to check in and check up. Alhamdulillah, this is an amazing blessing that we have this ability, this opportunity through technology to connect with one another, and we should do that to the best of our ability. And then when Allah permits, we actually implement the hadith literally. So when we can visit the sick, we'll visit the sick. When we can follow the janazah, when we can help bury our dead, may Allah have mercy upon them all. When we can do that literally, we'll do that literally. But sometimes that's not the case, and we do what's in our capacity, alhamdulillah. And Allah does not burden a soul with more than what it can carry, alhamdulillah. So this is this is something to keep in mind, that most of these things in these branches seem like things that we can't actually do in this time due to the quarantine and that sort of thing. But that's not necessarily the case, nor is the literal application of these ahadith always the best, because they could actually harm other people. They could harm the people that we're trying to help, which is completely contradictory to the spirit of the hadith. So we would want to keep that in mind, inshallah. So inshallah, we'll continue reading from these, inshallah, every day with Allah's permission, and I think we'll finish in the next week or so, with Allah's permission, and then we'll start with Allah's permission. We'll start another text, inshallah, before Ramadan, and we'll continue throughout Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you all and your families. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you all in good health and good faith. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and preserve us and help us to guide others and be a means. May Allah make us a means by which we guide one another and guide others to this beautiful religion. May Allah bless you all. We humbly ask your du'as for us and for our community, that Allah will preserve us as brothers and sisters and bring us back to His house. We ask Allah to forgive us our sins and to bless us in this life and the next life. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to see the month of Ramadan, to allow us to see the month of Ramadan as believers, fasting and standing in prayer, hoping for the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to see Laylatul Qadr as worshippers to Him alone, and may He give us that opportunity and accept from us our good deeds and forgive us our shortcomings. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.